The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibilities for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast that aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community. Welcome back to the Enough podcast and another episode of Subtext. Today, we're going to be discussing the allegations against the frontman of a band that was absolutely beloved in their time. I don't know if it's accurate to say that their music defined the genre that they were in, but they definitely helped to bring it even further into the mainstream, acquiring thousands upon thousands of loyal fans and followers as they grew from playing Long Island basements to headlining major festivals across the country. Today, we're going to be discussing the allegations made against Jesse Lacey, the lead singer of emo band Brand New.
Brand New was one of those bands that, if like us, you were active in the scene in the early 2000s, you just couldn't miss. They were everywhere all the time. They were either headlining a show you were attending to see another band, or they were on the lineup of a festival you were at, or if nothing else, your friends would play their music in the car or at a party. For a long time, they seemed like they were just always around, especially if you watch Steven's Untitled Rock Show on Fuse when that was a thing, because their videos were on all the fucking time.
I forgot about Fuse.
Oh, yeah. Recently, I found some VHS tapes that were just videos that I had taped off of Fuse and like episodes of Steven's Untitled Rock Show. And it's ridiculous. It's hilarious. That was an interesting time for, our little music scene.
Mm-hmm.
But during the band's 17-year run, they produced 5 full-length albums and toured across the country, seemingly every year, sometimes on festivals, sometimes just headlining themselves. But all of that came to a screeching halt in 2017.
Brand New released their 5th album, which was entitled Science Fiction, in August of that year. After the LP was released, touring band member Kevin Devine released the following statement via Facebook. It stated, quote, "The reason for saying anything in public is to share that I'll be quieting down the KD world for a while. There will still be handfuls of odd shows here and there, and a few non-tour or proper record-related projects. But it feels good to do something else, take stock and decide what comes next, and go away a bit in some core sense. That's it. Thanks as always, and be good to each other. These are scary, brutal, psychedelic times, but you're not alone." End quote. While 2017 was a scary time, and now is also a scary time, and next year will likely also be not probably so great, there's just some things in that message that seem a bit off. They're kind of cryptic, especially when you know, in hindsight, what's about to come next.
And what came next was a few months later, in October of 2017, during a tour for the new album, Brand New's lead singer, Jesse Lacey, stated at a show, quote, "We're going to be a band for about 14 more months, so thank you so much for being here tonight," end quote. But the band never hit that 14-month goal. 1 month later, on November 10th, 2017, news broke of allegations of sexual misconduct between Jesse Lacey and a minor. The initial accusation was made by way of a public Facebook post penned by former Brand New guitar tech Brian K. Diaz. The post asked why people had not yet grouped Lacey in with the other sexual predators who had recently been outed via the Me Too movement. A number of the responses to the post were in agreement, but left no concrete allegations. And just as a real quick aside for the doing it for clout crowd, Brian Diaz is a journeyman crew guy. He's been around for years. He's worked with everyone from Motion City Soundtrack to Guns N' Roses. He's currently the Blink-182 bass tech. He also wrote a very good book about his career with touring bands called 1800 Miles to Nowhere. This dude doesn't need clout. He doesn't need attention for calling out people. And as someone who works in the industry, calling attention to something like this could potentially impact future jobs. So, kudos to Brian for being the person to bring this into the light.
So on Brian's post, a woman named Nicole Elizabeth Gary responded with the following, which stated, quote, "He solicited nudes from me starting when I was 15 and he was 24, manipulated the hell out of me, demanded specific poses, settings, clothing, demeaned me, and made it clear that my sexuality was the only thing I had to offer. He knew what he was doing was shitty, so he wouldn't touch me until I was 19. I should have known by then, but he had screwed me up so much psychologically that all I wanted was his approval. It fucked me up to the point that I still have nightmares and wake up in a sweat. I still break down and have panic attacks when people play Brand New in a bar. Jesse Lacey is a piece of shit." End quote.
She left additional comments which also accused Lacey of not only soliciting nudes when she was a minor, but also of him masturbating in front of her via Skype. And this was not the first time that she had made comments of this nature on Diaz's post. Nor was this the first time that Diaz made this allegation on social media. And as we've seen countless times before, this initial post encouraged other women to come forward and describe their experiences of also being groomed by Lacey. And of course, as happens, all of these situations bore a striking resemblance to each other in the way that he went about the grooming process. Gary had met Lacey in 2003 when she was 15 and photographing a show in upstate New York. He gave her his email address after the show and before long began asking for nude photos over Instant Messenger.
Another woman, Emily Driscoll, was 16 in 2002 when she met Lacey for an interview. She was a photographer, a music journalist, and a fan of the band. Gee, that sounds familiar. During the interview process, she claims that Lacey made comments about her body and her breasts. Then he started soliciting her for nude photos when she was 17. She stated that he would send her photos of himself undressing, masturbate in front of her on video, and try to get her to engage in sexual situations with other people on camera while he watched. If she did not want to participate, she claimed that Lacey would threaten her access to the band. Quote, "There were a lot of instances where if I didn't want to participate or if I didn't want to take my clothes off and take photos, he would say, 'Okay, well, I guess I won't be seeing you the next time I come to Houston.'" End quote.
So fucking gross. Ugh.
It's just really smarmy. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
well, I guess I won't be seeing you next time I come to Houston. Ugh.
I think one of the things, like, and we'll go into this a little bit more, is that these people kept showing up at these shows, right? So it's really easy for the naysayer crowd to be like, well, if he's such a piece of shit, then why did you keep going? But, you know, and we're going to talk in the same circles that we always do about the same few things over and over again, because this is the real answer here. Like, you like the band, they have a position of power. You think that you're special because they're inviting you. And then they take that from you. And it's just like in an abusive relationships where someone sets it up where your sense of purpose almost is dependent on this other person. I'm not saying the sense of purpose is dependent on Jesse Lacey, but for this one small section, for this exact kind of moment in time in this music scene, having the lead singer of Brand New not only know your name, but chat with you regularly and invite you out to shows is a really big deal. This was huge to these people. And they're all under 18. So this is even bigger to them. These are people who don't have fully formed frontal lobes. They're not able to think through their actions and think about how their actions can affect their future. They're in it for the moment, and they're in it in a social way as well. Jesse Lacey liking you is a really big deal socially. Socially in the scene, socially in their high school. And the fact that I even have to say that is so weird. Socially in their high school. He's 20-something years old talking to high school kids. Weird.
Well, and also as groomers and abusers are so good at, like, yeah, he can say something like, well, I guess I won't be seeing you next time my band comes around. But then hit that person up again later and make everything better somehow. And I'm not saying, I don't have firsthand knowledge that this is what he did, but this is what these kinds of people do. Apologize for last time, say he didn't mean it, or, you know, whatever. And then the whole process starts over again. That's how these people operate. So moving on, when Emily was 18, she went to a Brand New show in Austin, Texas with her brother and a friend. She claimed that Lacey took her to the green room under the guise of getting his things, but shut the door behind them, pushed her against a wall, and assaulted her. She stated, quote, "I was walking around with him to find his backpack, and then it went from 0 to 60 when he closed the door." That also sounds familiar to another story we heard on here.
Mm-hmm.
He pinned me against the wall with his knee between my legs, end quote. She describes the incident as one of, quote, several instances of coercion during physically intimate situations, end quote, with Lacey.
After these allegations came to light, the supporting band on the science fiction tour, Martha, pulled out of the remaining European tour dates. They tweeted, quote, support survivors always, end quote. Kevin Devine backed out of the remaining shows. As you remember from before, he was one of their touring band members. And he released a statement which partially read, quote, I believe that it is critically important to really listen to and hear people who speak out about abuse of power and sexual misconduct, end quote. And with that, the band postponed the rest of the tour. One day later, on November 11th, 2017, Lacey, via the band's Facebook account, shared a statement. It's a very long one, so we won't be reading it in full here, but it's shockingly still up on Facebook, which is great. It's one of the positives of this situation. It's usually they take them down within like 24 hours or less.
Yeah, it's almost unheard of for that to still be up there. Amazing.
Yeah, years later. So it's still up on Facebook. You can take a look if you're interested. We'll also link the statement to our episode, so you can just give it a quick click. But in his statement, he does apologize for his actions.
He states, quote, I was selfish, narcissistic, and insensitive in my past, and there are a number of people who have had to shoulder the burden of my failures. I apologize for the hurt I have caused and hope to be able to take the correct actions to earn forgiveness and trust, end quote. He goes on to claim that he developed sex addiction. He cheated on his then fiance, now wife, which caused him to enter into professional treatment for that problem. However, he continued to cheat, to hide his behaviors, and to manipulate others. He also notes something that we have rarely seen in the years before or after. He mentions how he understands that as a band member, he held a position of power over fans, and he did not treat women with respect during that time. He also mentions sobriety, something we see a lot of in these kinds of posts as well. And he ends by stating that he will do what he can to earn forgiveness. Honestly, it's one of the better statements that we've seen, despite the fact that he really didn't take accountability for any specific allegations or actions. And with that, the rest of Brand New's 2017 European tour dates were canceled.
And that's really been kind of the end of it at this point. Since the allegations broke 7 years ago, the band has not played another show since. There is no talk of tours or reunion shows, despite the giant resurgence of early 2000s emo and pop punk bands getting back together to play like 10,000 capacity arena shows for hundreds and hundreds of dollars a ticket. But the band also continues to neither confirm nor deny that they are officially broken up. Back in 2021, the guy behind the Bamboozle Music Festival, which like was a really big deal out in Jersey between 2003 through 12. I don't know if like West Coast people would be as familiar, but like it was like the Jersey Warped Tour kind of, right? Like it was always in one spot, but it was just absolutely huge.
And they got giant bands of like Foo Fighters played, Bon Jovi played. Like it grew into this gigantic, like Riot Fest-esque sort of
or like
festival.
Lala. It's kind of like a Jersey Lala.
Yeah.
So the guy behind Bamboozle back in 2021 actually tried to get Brand New back together. He apparently had been reaching out to different members about reuniting and playing a festival in 2023, but that never happened despite his repeat requests.
Well, apparently Warped Tour is coming back next year, so, you know.
Oh, we all have something to look forward to.
Yeah. I think one of the saddest things about this whole thing is how absolutely normal this story is in the grand scheme of pop punk emo revival bands of the early 2000s. We talked a little bit about the culture on our Warped Tour episode, but to reiterate, this was a subculture that was geared towards the outcast teenagers, the ones who didn't fit in with the preppy cheerleader jock types at school. These bands were their safe space from the bullying from classmates or from parents who wanted them to be something they weren't. The bands made it okay and even cool to be outcasts. And above that, they were reachable. You could contact them via MySpace, LiveJournal, Friendster, or any number of message boards. They built these communities of fans through their accessibility. I have friends who met each other on the Taking Back Sunday Yahoo group 25 years ago, and they're still BFFs. You could hang out with the band at their shows, and they actually encourage their fans to do so. And so many people were betrayed and taken advantage of. We saw it with Steve Klein of Newfound Glory, Chris Connolly of Saves the Day, David, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, of Simple Plan.
The guy from Simple Plan.
The guy from Simple Plan, Jesse Lacey, and countless others. And despite the fact that, as we said, Lacey's apology is definitely one of the better ones we've seen, he still took advantage of teenagers, and that never should have happened in the first place.
So we're going to end this episode with a quote from Emily Driscoll, one of the survivors who responded on that Facebook post. When the news about Lacey broke and was being publicized on all these different music and news sites and in magazines and articles, she was quoted in one of them stating, quote, "I'm hoping that with this coming out, it opens the door for people really looking out for women in our scene. It's been talked about for a while, but it hasn't actually been happening." End quote. And while we completely understand and support that idea, Lacey's allegations occurred in 2017. Now, 7 years later, the guests of this podcast are vocalizing this exact same sentiment. We're living in a music scene where there have been changes, but nothing drastic. 7 years, nothing drastic. We're living in a place where we, too, are still hoping that when these stories come out, they open the door for people looking out for women in the scene.
Enough is a podcast centering on surviving abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you have been on the receiving end of harm from someone, be it artist, venue owner, booking agent, audience member, or someone else, and would like to share your story on a future episode, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com. All correspondences are kept confidential.